They first noticed her because she never spoke, yet somehow everything around her stayed perfectly ordered, and she was always there in the armory at the same hour every day, standing among crates of ammunition with a small notebook in her hand, counting rounds with a calm focus that felt almost unnatural to the soldiers passing by. Most of them assumed she was just another low-level support recruit, the kind that paperwork and logistics swallowed whole, someone meant to fade into the background of war and never touch its sharp edge. They joked quietly when they thought she could not hear, calling her slow or boring, or saying she probably chose ammo duty because it was safe and far from danger. She did not react, not once, not even when they brushed past her or laughed behind her back. She simply kept counting, correcting numbers that were already logged, and sometimes adjusting stacks that did not look wrong to anyone else, yet somehow always ended up more precise after her hands moved. The colonel barely spared her a glance during inspections, though he did notice that the armory reports were always exact, with no missing rounds and no errors, which was rare in a place like this. Sometimes late at night, guards swore they heard shots from the far range, impossibly tight groupings appearing on targets that no one had signed out to use, and every time questions were asked, nothing led anywhere because officially she never left the armory, and officially she was only counting ammo, nothing more, nothing dangerous, nothing worth remembering. At least that was what they believed before the truth began to surface. The first crack in that belief appeared during a routine strategy briefing, when an intelligence officer mentioned an old operation that had gone wrong years ago, somewhere far beyond the desert line, and as he spoke, one name almost slipped out before he stopped himself and corrected the report. The colonel stiffened at once, his hand tightening on the table in a way that did not match his calm face, and for a brief moment the room felt colder, as if a ghost had walked through the conversation. No one dared ask questions, yet the silence lingered long after the briefing ended, spreading through the base like an unspoken rumor. By evening, soldiers were whispering about a legendary sniper whose shots once decided battles. Before commanders even gave orders, a figure said to have vanished after being betrayed and erased from records. The stories were exaggerated, as legends always were, but fear and respect clung to every word. That night the quiet girl was back in the armory, counting as always, though her eyes paused when laughter echoed outside, and she heard her codename spoken carelessly by men who did not understand its weight. Her fingers hesitated for the first time since her arrival, then continued as if nothing had happened. Later, after lights out, a sentry reported movement near the long-range firing lane, the kind no one used because it was considered impractical and unnecessary. By morning, targets downrange showed impossible precision shots placed where wind and distance should have made them luck at best. The range log showed no activity and no weapons missing yet. The barrels inspected were warm in a way that could not be explained. The colonel studied the reports alone, his memory pulling him back to a time when war had a different face, and a single unseen shooter had once changed everything. And somewhere between the numbers and the silence, a truth was beginning to take shape, even if no one was ready to name it. The breaking point came with the convoy ambush just before dawn, when vehicles rolled out, thinking the route was clear and confidence was high, until the first explosion tore the road apart and gunfire poured in from elevated ground that had been marked as empty. Chaos spread fast. Drivers swerved, radios screamed, and soldiers took cover, firing blindly toward shadows that moved with intent. The colonel was rushed to command as reports came in, overlapping and confused, until something strange happened. The enemy fire began to fall silent, not all at once, but piece by piece, as if someone was removing threats one breath at a time. Spotters tried to track the source, yet every confirmed neutralization came from a distance far beyond standard engagement range, through crosswinds that shifted by the second. On the ridge overlooking the kill zone, no unit had been deployed, no sniper team had been authorized, and no drone feed showed movement, yet enemies dropped with clean precision shots that spoke a language only the most elite marksmen understood. By the time reinforcements arrived, the ambush was over, and the ground was still as if the fight had never happened. Ballistics teams later confirmed the impossible. The angles were wrong, the distances extreme, and the pattern unmistakable to anyone who knew it. The colonel stared at the analysis, feeling an old weight return to his chest, because he had seen this before years ago, when a single shooter had turned disaster into survival. Without ever asking for recognition, back at base the quiet girl returned from the armory at the exact moment. The last report was filed, her uniform clean, her expression unchanged, yet her hands carried the faint scent of oil and heat that did not belong to inventory work. Cameras showed nothing unusual, logs showed no movement, and still the colonel knew logic had failed him. He ordered a full review of personnel access and weapon tracking, but deep down, he understood that rules did not apply to ghosts, and that the shot that saved his men should not have existed at all, unless the legend everyone thought was dead had been standing among them the entire time, unseen, unheard, and waiting for the moment war called her name again. The colonel called her in without warning, and the room felt smaller the moment she stepped inside, carrying the same quiet presence she always did. He did not ask her to sit, and she did not offer to speak, waiting with a stillness that felt trained rather than nervous. He placed the ballistic reports on the table and watched her eyes scan them with a speed that confirmed more than any confession ever could. When he finally asked where she had been during the ambush, she answered simply that she had been doing her assigned duty, and somehow that was true in every way that mattered. The colonel changed tactics and asked a question no one else at the base could have asked. He spoke the old sniper codename softly, as if afraid the walls might hear it. The air shifted instantly, and for the first time, her expression moved not with fear, but with recognition. She met his eyes and said the name, herself steady and clear, and the silence that followed felt heavier than gunfire. In that moment, years of buried files, erased missions, and quiet betrayals flooded back to him. She had been written off, declared lost, because it was easier to erase a person than admit a mistake, and she had accepted it, choosing to keep serving from the shadows rather than walk away. He understood then that the girl counting ammo had never been hiding from war. She had been waiting, protecting lives without orders or credit. The colonel straightened and gave a formal nod of respect, not as a superior, but as a soldier, acknowledging another who had carried the weight alone and survived. The final test came sooner than anyone expected, when intelligence confirmed a larger enemy force moving fast with the clear intention of overwhelming the base before reinforcements could arrive. Tension spread through every corridor, yet the colonel felt a strange calm, because this time he knew exactly who stood between his people and disaster. He gave the order quietly, placing full authority in her hands, without ceremony or witnesses, and she accepted it with a single nod, already calculating angles, distances, and timing in her mind. As the assault began, the battlefield changed in ways the enemy could not understand. Command posts fell silent, leaders dropped before they could issue orders, and fear spread faster than bullets because no one could see what was killing them. The shots came from places that should not have been reachable, threading through terrain and weather as if the world itself bent to her will. Soldiers on the base felt the pressure ease, though they never saw her, never heard her weapon, only the sudden absence of threat where danger had been moments before. When it was over, dawn revealed a field of abandoned equipment and retreating forces, and not a single casualty on their side. The colonel assembled the unit and spoke of skill, discipline, and survival without naming her, yet every soldier knew the truth now. He later offered her reinstatement, her rank restored and public recognition, but she declined the spotlight, choosing purpose over praise. She returned to the armory as the base settled back into routine, counting ammo once more, though now every person who passed her did so with respect, because they understood that silence was not weakness, and that the most dangerous guardian was the one who never needed to be seen.